All right,
Yeah, so
oh, go ahead.
yeah, early COVID, um, and this is before my time, but there was, a tornado that hit, northern Georgia, and as it so happened, it hit our warehouse at the time, and so that ended up being kind of one of those situations where, like, well, like, what else do you do, And if I'm remembering correctly, the warehouse, understandably, would not let their own staff back in, and I'm sure there's like union rules and this and that, whatever, with the damage. But they were like, "Hey, if you want to come in and retrieve your inventory, you're welcome to do so." So, team members at the time, drove over from Nashville with like box trucks or whatever, and just, brought inventory over, and I don't know how much of it, was there kind of compared to what you see here now, but yeah. So that was, I think, basically the beginning of us doing warehousing and fulfillment in-house. And I think as we've done the analysis over time, it's still, I think, been kind of a net positive for us to kind of maintain that in-house. And, when it comes to, more high touch things in terms of, gifting and what have you, and kind of adding personal notes like from myself or from members of the team. I think it's been one of those things that has kind of allowed us to add kind of that personal touch as well in a way that you might not otherwise be able to do when you have your 3PL, like in Boston, Massachusetts, right? Which is where, right around where, one of our original 3PLs was when I was working at Away, the luggage brand back in the day. And so, yeah, kind of a crazy story. And then actually, like GMA ended up like talking about it. And then we ended up doing kind of a little sort of, they were kind of really supporting kind of small businesses at the time. And then Swiftwick was featured. And then, we ended up kind of doing like a whole big thing there. And that was kind of like, yeah, like, help these companies that are, struggling during COVID. And also like, this particular one got, the warehouse got hit by a tornado. And yeah, so, I mean, kind of crazy story once again before my time, but there's, some folks still here who kind of like went through that. And I think for some people, it was like, they're like first or second day. It's like, all right, we're going to Georgia or whatever. So,
So that's why you do that's why you do fulfillment in house now. That's funny. It like wasn't like a super serious business decision. It was like, well, a tornado
yeah,
hit.
not originally. Yeah.
Bring it all in.
Yeah.
If you've read the title of this episode, this is Mark Chou, the CEO of Swiftwick Socks.
Chou.
Oh my God.
Chou, my goodness. We just went over this.
All good.
Horrible
We did
joke.
just go over
Sorry,
this.
Mark.
It's Mark Chou. I was just testing the other guys to make sure they were paying attention.
Yeah. He was my nickname, like from my childhood best friend growing up. So, it's all, like, translation and romanization, whatever. It's complicated stuff. So, but yeah, all good.
Well, that was an interesting way to intro an episode. I love it. Start with a crazy story. A tornado.
There we go. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being here, man. And taking the time. I know you got kids and I got kids and I'm moving and everybody's crazy busy. And we scheduled this a long time ago, maybe a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
And we're here, man. I'm super excited to dive in. Chris, what you got?
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I was kind of scrolling through your Instagram and I saw you were a watch guy. I'm curious what watch you got on today.
So today it's the Tudor Black Bay 58. Someone was asking me the other day, like, do you have a favorite watch? And I'm like, like, I don't know, tough question to ask, but there's, to some extent, like a favorite watch for like any kind of given situation, right? And so like, if I'm fly fishing, I'm wearing this co-branded watch that Hamilton made with Orvis back in the day, and then if I'm doing this thing, then it's like another watch or whatever. But as far as kind of like a daily is concerned, I think I really like this one. I think it was Michael Williams, who, also hosts a podcast, and kind of he's sort of like a menswear pundit and journalist and PR guy. But I think he was talking about Tudor in a way that I kind of really appreciated, which is to say that, it's it's a thoughtful brand with like a great history, and it's a sister brand of like Rolex, but like not as like pretentious as Rolex, and it's a nice thing to wear. But when you are kind of running a PR firm, or previous to Swiftwick, and after I left Away, I was kind of running my own consultancy as well. It's one of those watches that like doesn't raise the eyebrows of your clients, being like, wait, so am I overpaying you? Because like, why are you wearing that kind of thing, And so, and the other thing I like about it too is that I feel like, maybe there's certain watches that are gifted to people and people didn't necessarily kind of choose them themselves. But what I found is that Tudor is a brand that somehow, the people who buy it, like kind of buy it like very intentionally. And so, even though it's not necessarily, a super kind of fancy or super pricey watch in the grand scheme of things, it's the one actually I get kind of stopped on the street, so to speak, the most often to kind of talk about. And once again, not because it's like super flashy or anything, but I think, it has there's a certain, I don't know, camaraderie or something like that with people who wear Tudors, maybe. I don't know. So like just the other day, we were, at a restaurant in Brentwood for dinner, and then our respective kids were kind of playing in this sort of like sort of artificial turf area, and like this, dad and I were talking, and then like I immediately clock his wrist, right, like 2 seconds in the conversation, because that's just who I am, right? And then like 10 minutes in, like he was like, oh, like, are you wearing a Tudor? And then sure enough, like we were both wearing
Tudor
the
Bros.
58, Tudor Bros, and same watch actually, but just like one black, one blue. So there you go.
So our friend, you guys will like this. Andy, friend of the pod, was giving me kind of the lowdown on watches. He's kind of a watch guy. He's got a Rolex Submariner that he got for himself when he made partner at his law firm. And he was talking about how his old boss is a big watch guy and has like a $25,000 watch. It's like a Patek Philippe. And correct me on the pronunciation if I'm not saying that right, because I'm not a watch guy. I'm rocking a Garmin. Rocking a Garmin 255 right now.
Yes. Oh, double. He's got a Garmin.
He's got the double watch.
He's a runner for sure.
So Andy was like kind of ribbing his boss about it, saying, why do you have this $25,000 watch? Like, what's the point? Nobody knows how much that costs. And his boss says to him, believe me, Andy, the people who I want to know.
Yep.
Wow.
Such a flex.
I mean, I think this is a great, sort of like segue in some ways to sort of, I don't know, maybe some of the things that we'll talk about today. But, I know that it's not all the time that you have, kind of folks kind of from the brand side come on. But like I am definitely a brand guy, consumer product guy, started off in the finance world back in the day, but, for the past, dozen plus years, it's kind of been all consumer retail. And I think one of the things that really kind of attracted me to that world, and particularly kind of to sort of, a lot of the, marketing and kind of sort of commercial aspect of the business, is the fact that brands are markers of identity, right? Like, how do you have a good brand? Like, what defines a good brand? It's a company, like a product, a brand that like evokes emotion. That you mention it and you can kind of imagine the brand world that you would enter into when you kind of buy a piece of that. And I think with Patek Philippe, I think it's a similar thing. It's a marker of identity for a certain target audience, if you will, right? And when you are consuming a certain product, kind of it means something to a certain group of people. And sometimes like the act of actually not caring is also like a little bit of a statement in and of itself, right? And sometimes like the same action can actually have intention or not. And so think like gray New Balance dad shoes, right? Like 99X line or whatever. Like this could either literally be like grandpa, or this cool
Style.
downtown kid in New York, right? Who's, like they bought like the ALD edition, right? Collab, and so, anyways, like I feel like, sometimes I bore people with kind of the brand and consumer psychology and whatever talk, but it's one of the reasons why I find brand building, I think, so exciting. So
yeah, I mean, part of when we had a conversation, me and Mark on the phone, about a 45-minute conversation, and part of it was just like your story into like how you are where you are now, and then part of your passion behind like what you do at Swiftwick and what you've done at other companies, but what your passion is with Swiftwick and building the brand, right? Before we dive into that though, just could you give us like a brief intro, like on like kind of what we talked about on the phone, just like how you got to where you are now? Because the CEO of Swiftwick is a big step, and like how you got to that point, and a lot of the steps were also really big positions. You have an extremely awesome and cool career, so let's go dive into that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's very kind. Graduated from college and, was at an undergraduate business school that is basically kind of like the feeder school to Wall Street. So that's kind of what I ended up doing. Worked at a firm called Blackstone in the M&A group for a couple years. And I think, learned a lot through that experience in terms of, just, how you analyze with rigor, right? And I think there's something, about kind of that sort of investment banking experience as like an analyst when you're working, 80, 100-hour weeks, that is just, kind of like builds grit and discipline as well, right? And I guess that combined with like the fact that, people who are, I don't know, 40 or 50 in this profession and, like are one, like in need of like, meaning outside of work. And then they have way too much money. And so three, they basically start doing triathlons. So maybe we'll talk about that whole sort of thing at another point in time. But it's once again, like it's interesting to sort of see these things play out, right?
True.
Went to kind of early stage venture, kind of investing in startups, and then kind of got to a point where I was like, here I am, like in my mid-20s. I don't really know anything about actually building companies. I've kind of been on the advisory side, I've been on the investing side, but like here I am, like telling entrepreneurs, like, I don't know how to like build their pitch deck, but like, what do I actually know about building a company? And so that kind of launched me to kind of explore the operating world, so to speak. And that ultimately was what led me to Ralph Lauren in an e-com strategy sort of role. That was sort of in a newly created group reporting to the president of global digital and e-com. And, as I kind of touched on before, like what interested me about kind of consumer retail was more kind of the customer facing side. Like I have this sort of finance background, but I didn't want to do FP&A, financial planning and analysis, right? Kind of forecasting numbers. That's, not really what we want to, that's a front office job. On the banking side, it's kind of a back office job. On the brand side, you want to be kind of in a marketing or a design role, right? And so I think it was a great initial experience for me to get a lot of, kind of, it was kind of like a boot camp experience, if you will, right? And I think quickly learned that I loved consumer retail, but I was not a fan of big corporate. And so basically ever since then, it's been all kind of smaller consumer brands. There was one, like a small camera bag brand called Ona, which back in the day actually worked with Joe Greer, who I know you guys cool. know. Yeah. And then after that company was acquired by a lower middle market PE. That kind of prompted me to start looking for new roles. And it was right around the time that Away was popping up. And so Ended up joining Away basically a month after it launched as the third employee and first exec there, and ultimately kind of led marketing and e-com, and then a few other kind of functions thrown there over the course of time before finally being tapped to lead international at Away kind of during my last year. And another crazy COVID story like the one that we started off with, right? I gave 4 months of notice in Thanksgiving of 2019, not realizing that my last 2 weeks at Away were going to be the first 2 weeks of New York lockdown. And so it was like a very anticlimactic end to what was otherwise kind of a quite the rocket ship ride, going from like launch to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Yeah, kind of that's kind of how it shakes out sometimes. But left Away because I wanted to get back a little bit to what Away felt like in the early days. Smaller, more nimble, kind of just doing things quickly, and being able to do that with kind of other early stage companies, kind of in a consulting capacity, I think was one of those things that ended up being, I think a really great way to kind of still stay embedded in that world during what was like otherwise like a kind of crazy time in consumer retail. And then in my life personally too, we had, an 18-month-old basically, like right around the time when COVID hit. And so, all of a sudden there's like no childcare, and, like schedules are crazy. And so like we did have friends who had, like both mom and dad were working, and then like kid is just like literally hanging out in the living room all day, and you have like nowhere else to go, like stuck in these like apartments that are, probably on average like 600 and 900 square feet, I don't know, like maybe your friends in Manhattan have more money or whatever, but it was definitely quite the time. And did that kind of consulting through kind of my consultancy called Bradhurst Ventures for several years. And, it was right around spring of last year, we decided like, hey, like, let's check out Nashville. We'd been going through quite a period of time sort of wrestling with like, do we stay or do we go for a little while? But there were some personal connections to Nashville. One of my wife's close friends was moving down here, and she grew up here. My folks are still in Birmingham, Alabama, where I grew up. And so kind of came down and ultimately decided, the next month in April that we're going to move at the end of June. And so 2 weeks before we, were kind of packing up our house like Scotty, we ended up, I ended up getting an email from a kind of contact of mine from New York days who now works in kind of the warehousing world in Nashville with a lot of consumer brands, so very well connected here. He was like, there's this company called Swiftwick that's looking for a CEO. Like, would you be interested? And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a great opportunity. And, had like one Zoom conversation before I left, and then continued, those conversations with the board after I arrived in Nashville. And then, before you know it, I started at Swiftwick. My 1 year anniversary was 4 days ago. So it's like been just at that 1 year mark, and it's been, a fun kind of first year getting into the swing of things. A lot of work to do to kind of revamp the company. In a nutshell, I think it's been a company that has always had, really great product. It's, has kind of in its own way a cult following. Yeah. I would try and do that right now, except I'm like, using like the standing desk, and I don't think I'm that flexible. So
for what it's worth, I put these socks on this morning, and I did not plan this.
Love it. That's what we like to hear. But if not the case, I'm okay with that too. You know,
I only wear Swiftwick socks, so it's not that hard.
But you know, there's kind of this great sort of like Made in America story as well. A lot of our you know, stocks, the vast majority actually made like in Tennessee as well, and so so much opportunity to do a better job of, I think, storytelling than the company had done in the past. And you know, in many ways, it was more a manufacturer of socks rather than a brand of socks, so to speak, right? And so I was brought on to sort of help do that brand building and storytelling. And yeah, I think it's been an exciting first year doing that.
How have you done that so far?
So I think there's a few, you know, ways that we've done that. You know, there's part of it that is kind of around the identity itself. And so, I don't have packaging with me here, but or old packaging, but let me grab a few things. You know, we had old packaging, old website, things that were kind of you know, in existence for a while, and I think you know, could benefit from a refresh. And so there was kind of that aspect of things. There was, you know, the word mark and the logo, you know, aren't too different, but you know, they're refined. We have, you know, kind of our new sort of brand color, and it's one of those things where, like, if you're not in this world, like you'd laugh at like how much time that we spent, you know, trying to like land on like the exact shade of you know, what we call endurance red, kind of like the creation of this, you know, like manifesto here in terms of like trying to kind of create a brand world and language around that, like new creative, as far as kind of everything visual is concerned, as well as kind of our brand copy on the site. We were up in New York earlier this summer, you know, doing a full day of shooting for road run, a full day for trail run, a full day for road cycling, you know, and just kind of, you know, embedding like a lot more, I think, motion into and intensity, I think, into the brand. I think there was an extent to which I think prior brand positioning had become like a little bit more sort of, you know, kind of enjoyment of the outdoors and like look at the beauty of the outdoors, which I think is, you know, one way to go about it. But I think the sort of like new direction that we latched on to is more about kind of, this idea of endurance, right? Something a little bit more intense, you know, like engineer to endure here, right? Speaking to both the athlete and the sock itself, right? I think another aspect, though, above and, you know, people say, you know, if you have a new website, if you have new packaging, if you have all these new things, like, so what? You know, like at the end of the day, like there's an extent to which a lot of that doesn't necessarily matter. Like you also like got to get out there. Scotty, I like your, you know, just putting your foot up there and kind of you're like doing my work for me, but putting the Swiftwick word mark like right at the corner of your, your screen. Right. Perfect. Yeah, just leave it there. Leave it there.
I'm like,
perfect.
I do not have a podcast like room right now because we're moving. So like, I'm just on the couch. Like,
yeah. And I think a big part of sort of what I identified too was that, you know, a lot of I think what I've been doing is really kind of more of a return to Swiftwick's original roots, right? The early days at Swiftwick, I'd heard from our co-founder and board chairman, was like classic, smells like a locker room office, right? Everyone there is, you know, some version of like cycling bum, running bum, you know, insert, you know, endurance sport bum kind of thing, right? And that's so awesome. That was very much kind of at the core of the culture. But at the time I took over, you know, for the, you know, other than like a couple folks, you know, one kind of former marathoner, and now kind of current like very avid cyclist, and then another guy who's also a runner. There wasn't really much in the way of kind of personal connection on the team to the sports that the athletes that we serve partake in, right? And at some point in time, like there's something a little bit missing there. And I think you become disconnected to the culture or the subculture that your customers operate in. And if you don't understand culture, how can you define culture? How can you really kind of push the bounds of what a brand like within the running world or within the cycling world can be? And so for us, I think a big part of our relaunch was kind of getting much more involved with the run community again. So this is everything from, being really supportive of, the run clubs locally in Nashville. And, we have had other activations kind of elsewhere as well as we kind of just continue investing in that world. Both my head of marketing, Katie, and I actually signed up separately for the kind of training group hosted at the Exchange here in Nashville. It's, I guess thanks to Joe, who used to work at the Exchange, before he moved, for making the connection to us here. And we miss him in Nashville, but understand why it made sense to move to North Carolina. But like all of these small things in isolation don't necessarily magically change a brand, right? But these kind of small drips and kind of in for like running parlance, kind of the idea of just like stacking bricks, right? I think on the brand side too, ultimately kind of allows you to go from a place where, the brand looked like this, and then all of a sudden it actually like feels transformed, even though it wasn't kind of one single action that did it. It was that daily repetition, that kind of did it. And I'm thinking about our, brand video now as well, kind of that we launched to sort of like reintroduce Swiftwick to the world back in August. And kind of the first line basically starts out like, why do you do this to yourself? Right? Like wake up at the crack of dawn. Is it because like you enjoy the morning light? Like, well, there's actually not even any light yet, so it's obviously not for that, and so on and so forth. And so, I think what it makes me think of is the fact that, like a lot of times, like brand building, you think of like, I don't know, big fancy, like out of home campaigns, like what Nike did in Chicago and New York, right?
Yes.
And kind of big TV spots and kind of Super Bowl commercials. But yeah, a lot of that brand building, it's like, it's really in those like small details, and that kind of are often overseen, that happen kind of day in, day out, that in aggregate result in you kind of building something pretty special. And so that's, what we're trying to do here at Swiftwick. And I think that, to be clear, the company, I think by the time I came on board was, already like pretty special. Right. And, I always talk about how there would be too much cognitive dissonance for me to join a company that had crap product.
Right.
Like as someone in kind of this sort of marketing, sort of commercial world, I just would not be able to bring myself to kind of try and sell a product to people that I didn't believe in myself, right? And so I think throughout my career, it's always been about companies I believe in. And so, but by the time that I got to know Swiftwick, and, it was very exciting kind of realizing like, oh, wow. So there's all this opportunity to do a better job of like basically talking about things that are already happening, right? Like Casey Lichtig won like Western States in 2016 wearing Swiftwick, right? I don't know if any of you are golfers, but Adam Scott actually won the Masters in Swiftwick as well.
That's awesome.
And if you see like any photo of, Panthers hoisting the Stanley Cup over the course of, past year or whatever, in all likelihood, they'll actually, and this is sort of like a random tangent, but they'll likely be wearing Swiftwick cut-resistant wrist sleeves, which kind of was like an outgrowth of us starting with cut-resistant socks for hockey players. So like a lot of NHL equipment managers are kind of, big.
How do you make a cut-resistant sock?
Yeah, so and I think we are also very clear. It's not cut proof. It's cut resistant, right?
It's like waterproof and water resistant.
Yeah, exactly. There's no kind of there's no such thing as like a Wolverine kind of what is it, adamantium or whatever. That's not a real fiber or real material, right? Like this is just kind of X-Men world.
It's not Kevlar.
Yeah. But we do kind of have, sort of special fibers that we weave into the sock that kind of make it, highly resistant against kind of slicing. And so, to be honest, it's one of those things I actually don't even know exactly how we got into that market in the first place. This is a kind of product line that predates me, I think, by quite some time. But it's one that has done well for us. And while, it's not the core of what we are now focusing on, it is still kind of a strong business that we have. And, kind of on a separate note, it is true that we've gotten into, hockey and other sports. And I think at one point in time, because somebody, was getting into IndyCar racing, I think we actually also made, for a period of time, fire retardant race socks, I want to say.
That's so rad.
And so
bring them back.
And so I think it's maybe so. But I think part of what we had landed on, with around the time that I started speaking with the board, was kind of a little bit of a crystallization of okay, we need to be a bit more focused. We need to once again go back to our roots again. Really focus on that endurance athlete. And I think from a practical point of view, the running market is huge and I think only growing, right? Yes. I think when it comes to running media, when it comes to kind of run clubs, there's so much about run culture. And this includes brands as well that wasn't really the case until, very recently. In some ways it feels mind-boggling to me that Nick and Tim West started Bandit in 2022 basically, and you look at them now, you're like, wow, they've done a really fantastic job of building in a really
not only I would say that what was I trying to say? I can't remember. I lost my train of thought. Keep going. It will come back to me.
There was something in there I wanted to key in on, and you talk about the traditional culture of Swiftwick, the company, the office smelling like a locker room, and there's endurance athletes who work there. And it made me think of a title of a book that I heard about a long time ago, Let My People Go Surfing. I don't know if you've read it, but I believe it's the founder of Patagonia. And whenever there's a big swell, out of the office window, everyone, ditches their emails and whatever, and just goes out and grabs a board and goes surfing. I just think that's cool. Imagine a dream job. Swiftwick could definitely be a dream job like that. It's a brand that I see where you could probably pull that out of the brand and make the culture internally part of the brand. And then I
think that is part of our brand, our kind of company building now. We currently have, someone consulting for us right now, kind of on the field marketing front. And, he's the founder of one of, if not the largest, run clubs in Nashville, right? Who better to the better of a person to actually like help us with getting into the mix there, right? And ensuring that we are kind of really understanding like the nuances of and dynamics of a certain world, right? That can be so kind of niche, right? Like there's one city kind of on our sort of fall tour calendar, if you will, right? Where we kind of found out, like, oh wait, this one club has beef with another club. So you should not actually basically kind of like sponsor both clubs in this city on the same week. Probably okay for you to do it on, like 1 month after the other or something like that. But we should probably avoid, 2 days apart or 3 days apart and kind of doing something along those lines. And then we're like, wow, that's really interesting and kind of really niche. And,
I kind of like that. I kind of want to have a run club that has beef with another run club. It sounds like competitive.
We could make it happen.
The Jets and the Sharks. Yeah. So,
I wanted to ask,
remember what I was going to say.
I'll go, Scotty. Oh yeah, go ahead, Scotty. Don't want to cut your train of thought again, bro.
Dude, it's all good. We were talking about the running, like you getting back to your roots, and then the running world booming. I think not only is like running booming right now, but there's like this theme: the run good or look good, feel good, run good. Is like a common theme. Like for race day, everybody, like your fit, your kit per se matters. And like, and that goes down all the way to your socks. Like for me on race day, like I have a very specific type of sock. It just so happens to be Swiftwick. I promise you, I'm not like, this is not intentional.
Scotty's trying to land a sponsorship over here.
No, it's a very specific type of Swiftwick that I wear. That literally makes like my race shoe feel a different way than like another pair of Swiftwicks or like another run sock that I tried. So I think like branding is super important in that like boom of the run good or feel good, look good. And we also talked about that on the phone. You're presented with a bit of a challenge as a sock company because you're hidden by a shoe. Talk about that.
The shoe is the hero product for sure. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, one of the things, this is even prior to Swiftwick, but kind of during my consulting days in particular, and then also when I was advising companies as well. I do think, usually I think it comes up when you're talking about influencer strategy, right? And the fact that companies that operate in the quote unquote basics world. So think like, I don't know, like a Tommy John or a Mac Weldon or something like that. I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit challenging because, these are items of clothing that are supposed to be worn under other pieces of clothing, right? And, kind of probably the most notable brand of the sort in terms of just kind of like visual iconicness would be Calvin Klein, right? And there's that billboard in kind of right where Soho meets NoHo. That is, some really attractive male or female, or maybe both, wearing Calvin Klein, but they're basically wearing it as outerwear though, right? That's the reason why it's kind of like a statement. And so I think when you're talking about kind of influencers and kind of like regular Joes and Janes, to kind of expect them to be willing to kind of like display themselves, like can be a challenge. I think like underwear in particular, I think is, and a special challenge, more so I think than socks. But I think, socks can also be challenging because I don't know, like feet can be kind of gross, like, like they can be smelly. Like there's a lot that's like not, necessarily super sexy about socks. But then I think you can also say like, because the bar is kind of so low for this category, just kind of given like it's like context on your body, like there's an opportunity, I guess, to really kind of push the envelope there as well. And, I think it's funny too. Like I feel like there's probably a world and, like not that long ago where kind of you're like, pre-race, flat lay photo,
Yeah.
probably like didn't include socks oftentimes. And I think we're entering into a world where that is, much more common now, which I think is exciting. Clark, who you just recently chatted with, kind of before Indy, posted a really great, kind of video of his kit. And, the Swiftwick Flight XT was there, which, we were excited to see. And
shout out Clark.
Yeah.
Shout out to
we all know Eric.
228. Yeah.
228.
Crazy.
We all know Eric took that video, by the way. So shout out Eric.
Yeah, they were in the same Airbnb that night.
Yeah, when you have a photographer, videographer friend, take advantage of it.
Mark,
create that content.
Don't sleep on the like feet pics though. Those are going at a premium these days.
Be careful where you go with that conversation. I feel like this could veer off into weird territory here, but
we joke. We have a group text with those guys too, and we kind of see it as like a badge of honor with how banged up your feet are. So occasionally we'll just get like a foot pic in our group text, and we're like, "Oh man, that's a nasty blister." I don't know that you could actually run with that on like a marketing campaign, but it's definitely between us a kind of a badge of honor.
It could be interesting. Floberg's
and I do think like
post indie feet pic was pretty gnarly. There was like one of his toes was just red.
Not safe for work.
I think particularly in the ultra world too, I feel like it's super gnarly. And you have people who are kind of taping up their toes beforehand, right? Like kind of like slathering like, I don't know, like Vaseline on it and whatever. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this child. I feel like these socks, these shoes, literally like one-time use kind of deals, right? So
that's an interesting marketing campaign. You got like an ultra runner coming in, like say they're in the lead and they're at mile 75 of a 100-mile race, and like painting a visual here, and they got like a crew of like 8 people, and one person's feeding them, one person's like cleaning them, one person's taking off the shoes, and then the person taking off the shoes takes off the sock and like patches up their feet, and then puts on like a brand new pair of Swiftwicks, and just like, and then like ASMR like snaps the top of the Swiftwick, and then all of a sudden the runner is like just like, I can go win this race now because it's got a brand new pair of socks.
All right, I'll pass this on to head of marketing. So
tell Katie. Tell Katie. I don't need anything from that. That was free.
Sounds great. Well, for our next brand video, we'll let you know if we need talent for that shoot. So
I could make it happen. Just beat my feet up. I just hit my finger really hard with a mallet and broke it. I could probably do it to my toes.
Yeah, Scotty could use some Swiftwick
dedication,
hammer-proof gloves for sure.
Mark,
who do you see?
Hammer resistant, not hammer-proof. Let's be clear.
I wanted to ask who do you see right now in the space that's doing a good job? Like, you don't have to name competitors specifically, but it's funny you just mentioned kind of influencer marketing and direct to consumer going that way. We think of VPN. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of like, the influencer marketing. They have a coach that's the VPN coach, and they have a team of, people with like the minimum of like 100,000 followers or whatever it may be. And they're all great athletes. But is that something that you could see Swiftwick trying to get into, or does it not make sense for you? And talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that, I think, don't want to maybe go into too much detail when there's nothing kind of quite to chat about with, but, we were catching up with Jeff just, the other day, just kind of, pre-Indy, and, we sent a box of socks, with someone in Nashville who is heading up there as well, for kind of the Bat City team. And so, in various ways, like, we're already kind of doing stuff like that, with kind of Zap endurance athletes at the Olympic trials. We had a bunch of folks kind of wearing Swiftwicks as well. And so figuring out a strategy around kind of how we partner with folks of various sorts, whether they be individuals, organizations, other brands through collabs, is definitely a huge part of, I think, how of kind of what we need to be thinking about in kind of the coming year and beyond. I think, it's, I don't know, even if there are competitors, potentially like listening to the pod or whatever, like, I mean, I don't think any of this is really kind of rocket science, right? But like who you actually choose, who you have relationships with, how thoughtful you are around kind of brand alignment, between athlete and brand, between brand and brand, right? These are kind of like the nuance is kind of all in that decision, right? Like it kind of reminds me of one of those sort of mantras I remember from like my junior VC days, where they talk about, like ideas are worth nothing, execution is everything, kind of thing, right? And I think it kind of sort of conceptually made sense to me on when I was kind of on the venture side, but it wasn't until I was actually kind of brand side that it actually like hit me what that meant, right? When I was at Away, 2016, early days of building the brand, there was another competitor actually at that time who had gone out for venture funding to kind of like the same kind of group of VCs. Basically, I don't know, like half of them were like in our camp, half of them were in the other camp. And, the pitch decks could not have been, at the end of the day, that different, right? Manufacturing is going to be kind of pretty similar. Like the COGS is going to be pretty similar. Like at this sort of, pre-launch stage, like whatever you sort of like penciled in kind of your kind of like financial forecasts are going to have like roughly the same amount of like acquisition costs baked in, like kind of like identical ideas in a way, right?
Yeah.
And, one of them went out of business, I think, fairly quickly. And then, while Away, of course, like, everyone else in the sort of travel world, did have kind of a tough COVID period. Like, I mean, during those first 4 years, like we really went from like nothing to, I think, and I try not to, be like, to think of myself as being like too like biased and non-objective here, but I think we did kind of like change the category, right? From one that was very kind of functionally oriented, to one where, once again, a product actually becomes a marker of identity. Carrying Away at the airport, right, actually means something, it broadcasts something to the people around you. And so, like, we were able to do that because of all of these kind of, once again, teeny tiny daily decisions and tactics that ultimately kind of resulted in that. Whereas I think, this competitor, I think, had a very similar idea, but executed differently, right? They were very much feature focused, without much in the way of kind of the storytelling and emotional aspect of things. And ultimately what I think humans crave is story, right?
Yes.
And sure, when it comes to products, you want it to actually do the job, to be functional, but I feel like that's kind of table stakes, right? Moisture wicking is great. Breathability is great. High cushion or low cushion, depending on what your preference is great. And I think we do have, certain technologies and fibers and whatever that like literally don't exist elsewhere on the market. And, we talk about those, but I think if that's all you talk about, you are missing something, right? You're kind of missing an opportunity to connect with someone emotionally. And, given that this was a little bit of a kind of sort of, I don't know, atrophied muscle, if you will, at Swiftwick when I came on board. One of the videos I actually showed the team, when we were trying to talk about like what does a brand mean, like what does a good brand do, that kind of line of questioning. I ended up pulling up, I think, a pretty iconic video from the Olympics back in '92 in Barcelona, which you guys are probably very familiar with, where Derek Redmond is running around the track, right? He pulls up, like, he's torn his hamstring, and he gets back up and he starts limping towards the finish line. His father comes out of the stands, right? And he's just like bawling his face out. And actually, like, the crazy thing is, like, his dad's actually wearing like a "Just Do It" cap, right? Like it's like literally like it feels like a scripted Nike commercial, but this is actually unscripted, right? Which is kind of insane. But I see like crosses to the finish line. The NBC commentator or whoever it was at the time, talks about like this is the Olympic spirit, right? Like this guy came in like dead last, like technically like it's like a DNF or whatever, because like you can't have someone like helping you over the finish line or whatever, but like man, like that kind of like endurance, right? Sure, I think there's kind of Lindsey Bradley just winning Indy, right? Like that's like one type of endurance, and kind of like actual like just winning and getting first place, like that's incredible. But I think from our point of view, like we want to be able to kind of speak to those, I think, who really are at that level where they may be kind of going to win Western states, right? But then also for that person who is just for whom endurance means getting up before dawn every day and running 12-minute miles or whatever, because you just decided that, hey, like this is what we're going to do, and you're kind of committing yourself to that. Like we think that's amazing too, right? And so kind of defining endurance in kind of these various ways is part of what we're kind of exploring as we relaunch the brand. So
there's a great point in that. And our friend Eric Floberg, like, he's one of the most tracked guys. Every race he runs, every marathon he runs, he's one of the most tracked people on their app or whatever. And compared to like the elite runners running, even in the Chicago Marathon, Eric Floberg is up there with those guys in terms of how many people are tracking him. And that's just he's a great runner, but that his following is from his storytelling. He's a dad with like 4 kids, and he just wears his heart on his sleeve in his videos, and people follow him because they feel like they know him and they can resonate with him. And I mean that just shows in the tracking numbers. So many people are tracking him just as much as, or even more than the pro runners. So people are really invested in just the normal everyday people now more than ever, I would say. So it's a great
sure.
That's a great point. I'm curious, do you guys sell more socks to runners or to cyclists, or is runners your main demographic, you'd say?
More runners than cyclists. I think at the end of the day, the running market, I think, just far outstrips the cycling one. I think there's a decent amount of crossover too, right? In terms of like people who like may both run and cycle, and kind of both of these kind of being endurance sports. But I think, that's one of the amazing things about running, is that it's so accessible, right? And you can basically do it with almost zero incremental dollars out of your pocket, right? I won't get offended if you're just taking your basketball shoes and some Cotton Crew socks out for your first run, right? I
did that.
recommend you to upgrade to your socks, your socks at some point in time, as well as your shoes. But actually, I'm thinking of one of the stories in Shoe Dog, and Bowerman, who's co-founder of Nike, along with Phil Knight, writes kind of like a seminal book on running, right, and kind of like launches kind of the sort of first like running boom. And I remember, I think Phil Knight expressing his frustration that Bowerman is basically saying like, whatever, like the shoe doesn't even matter, right? Like it's not that big of a deal. And then he's like, oh my gosh, like you're my business partner, and like could you not have just said like the shoe matters, but yeah, the accessibility of it though, I think is unparalleled versus with a bike. Like even if you buy something kind of fairly cheap, like I don't know, just making heads or tails of like where you should start and what have you, I feel like can feel like a lot. Not to mention just sort of like the idea of like if you don't have like a greenway near you or kind of protected lanes that you can ride, like it can be pretty intimidating. And
Definitely.
I did have a so in New York, people often kind of ride along the west side, cross over the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey for kind of long rides. And I was coming back from one with friends right before we kind of hit the bridge again, going back into the city. And I think it was like someone who had like just bought a new car. Like he's trying to, I think, do like a 3-point turn. And I think maybe has like a stick shift and it stalled or something like that. Anyways, he's just actually just stuck there. And here I am, coming down, like, I mean, not insanely fast, probably like, like 25 miles an hour, but still like, at a decent clip. And then this guy like literally just does not move. And then in a split second, I have to decide like, do I run straight into him and like flip over the handlebars, or do I, and, in the split second, I was like, the clear answer is just to, slide my bike like into the sidewalk / curb.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, like these are the sorts of things that I feel like, I don't know, like fingers crossed, like this is like nothing close to this has happened to me when it comes to running, so I mean, very long-winded answer of talking about the running market being bigger than the cycling market, but yeah, I think what's also really been, I think, fun to observe from my point of view is kind of this, what I would call all paces welcome sort of mentality that a lot of run clubs have. And, it can be so intimidating kind of showing up for the first time and wondering, are you going to be left behind? Like, is everyone there going to be just like faster than you? Like, are you going to be running along and then all of a sudden, like you're the new person and you don't even know what the route is, but like you can't keep up. And so like, you're just like, oh, well, I guess I'll just map myself back to my car and then I'm going to go home. Like these sorts of thoughts are, I think, very natural to have in any sort of like situation where you're like a new person kind of entering into like a new group of whatever sort. It could be a new school, a new church, a new whatever, and you're just kind of like standing there being like, oh, like this is so awkward, right? But I think the emphasis on kind of all paces welcome, I feel like really allows the sport to grow in a way where maybe I think on the cycling front, there's a little bit less of that.
Yeah.
And, like just like this idea of like, people dressed up like Power Rangers zipping by, like it's not necessarily like feel like the most welcoming. Right. But then I think,
sure, like
on
a
the other
barrier
hand too,
entry in cycling, like, and there's levels to all the gear too. And it's, you talk about like finance guys getting into Tri. It's like, you got to spend their money somewhere. Like, why not buy a $7,000 bike? And
Cervelo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scotty.
But yeah, I think in some ways, I think you could. What's interesting, you know, in terms of just actually like sort of anecdotal stories is folks, I think, who end up getting into cycling as they're recovering from running injuries, though.
Yeah.
And kind of certain, you know, motions like from the running side that would be exacerbated if you just kind of continue pounding the pavement every day, that you can sort of bypass by being on a bike. It's kind of, there's something interesting there, I feel like, in terms of how that crosses over. I don't know if it's as much in the other direction, but I feel like I've definitely met quite a few folks, I feel like, who have kind of started off more on the running side and then kind of ended up getting into cycling for either kind of cross training purposes or because of injury or, you know, whatever else.
Yeah, that is a super common way. That's how I got into using Zwift for cycling, cross training. So, yeah, that's why I bought a bike too. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What is your most sold or purchased sock? What's the most popular?
Good question.
Single sock, length and style and color. What does it boil down to? What's at the top? I want to know.
So that would be kind of our ultra thin no-show sock, the Aspire. So
really?
I think that reveals us as, you know, more millennial heavy than Gen Z, I suppose. I don't know if you've kind of been keeping track of, you know, it's kind of so weird this year. Like all of a sudden,
no shows are for old people.
Like like socks are now, you know, like, you know, at the tip of the tongue in terms of like the, you know, cultural conversation and like the cultural zeitgeist, like in this sort of completely unexpected way, because it's kind of this marker of, you know, this generational marker. But I mean, I distinctly remember I think it was middle school, and, you know, I think ankle socks at that point in time. So it wasn't kind of cruise, you know, we'd already sort of shrunk down to ankles, I guess. And I'm guessing I've observed like these cool kids wearing no-shows, right? And I'm guessing I probably asked my mom for them. She said like, yeah, perfectly good socks. Like I'm not like throwing these away or whatever. And so this is like such a like clear memory of mine. I have no idea. Like maybe this is like just, you know, this is foreshadowing for my future career or something like that. But I remember kind of pulling my ankle socks down so that they were basically no-show length, folding the top of the sock over my foot.
100%.
And then creating my no-shows that way. And so for me, there's like a certain kind of, you know, poignancy in realizing that we're now in that part of like the cycle of culture that's now going back in the other direction, right? Where, you know, you have, I guess, probably Gen Xers and millennials in the middle who are kind of no-show folks. And then, you know, our parents, and then like our nephews who are part of like the kind of crew stock camp, you know? And so, it's funny how that goes. But, you know, what I will say is, you know, kind of exciting, I guess, in a way about this development is that, you know, higher cuff heights equal more opportunity for storytelling though. Right. And so, there's something that is, I don't know, regrettable, if you will, about wearing, you know, an amazing sock, and literally the entire sock being covered by like this amazing shoe, and like the amazing shoe gets all the credit, right? And so, you know, I think like credit to the Gen Z kids, you know, for pushing kind of, you know, kind of quarter crew, mid crew, crew height socks, and giving the sock brands a opportunity to to do more storytelling.
I had heard that ankle socks are out and crew socks are back in. So I'm going to get on swiftwick.com right now and order a pair of crew socks for running. So it's happening. But I think that
discount code Mark.
yeah. It's so funny how like fashion goes full circle. Like we were talking about the New Balances earlier being back and crew socks. It's like, yeah, like you have like the McFarlanes, like the dad shoes and crew socks, like Mr. McFarlane on Instagram mowing the lawn. Shout out. They're from Louisville, Kentucky as well.
Okay.
But that's the, you also have Jack Harlow, wearing the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I just got back from Japan for a week, and I'm questioning everything I know about fashion right now. So I'm super confused. So yeah, gonna have to give it some time. Very different over there. Scotty, you got some rapid fires, bro?
I was born with rapid fires. They just flow all the time.
Oh, okay. All
right, Mark.
Sorry for asking.
Let's do it. Let me grab my my cord here while I get ready.
All right. So I'm assuming you know what rapid fires are. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're ready. Well, anyways, if you don't know what rapid fires are, and if you're new here listening to the podcast, rapid fires is a time where I ask stupid questions to cool people, and they are not allowed to elaborate about their answers. Sometimes they're not stupid questions, but they're usually just questions that come from my brain or ChatGPT, which is a wonderful tool in business. I actually don't use that for my business at all. I wonder if it could help the lawn care business at all. All right, here we go. I start and end.
Content creation for your blog. Yeah.
That's one thing I don't do is I don't do social media for my business. I really should, but honestly, my business works without it really well. I probably should look into that.
Scotty, anyways, if you pay me,
just on like a personal note, right? Like I feel like some like good like authoritative content on aeration and overseeding would be like, I feel like that's some good stuff right there.
It's funny. That's funny you say that. My highest profit margin by a long shot, I mean, close to 5x any other service is aeration and overseeding. It's insane actually, the profit margins of aeration and overseeding specifically. It is at the top by a long shot of all my services. So you might have something there.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, I could talk about this. This is like a whole nother hour. We're done here. All right, rapid fires. Here we go. I start and end with the same two questions, but the last question is going to be different. However, you are a runner, which we haven't talked about at all, and we can talk about that after this. But first question, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Going to be the darkest dark chocolate that you can find.
Ooh, love that.
Which is it's challenging. Yeah, but
all right, there's two types of people in this world, and I want to know which one you are. And it has to do with socks. We were just talking about this, and we'll boil it down to short or longer socks. What kind of socks do you wear? Short or long? Like
both, depending on the situation.
Respect. That was a trick question.
What are you wearing now?
I'm wearing the black Aspire no-shows. Actually, one of the original samples that actually rolled off the onto the manufacturing floor after we started doing kind of some updates to the word mark and what have you, kind of following the rebrand, and we were kind of sampling, Super Mario World, right? Early days, like, everything is kind of like blocky and pixely.
Yes.
Right. That's literally the world of socks because you're dealing with individual stitches. And so you don't basically have very high resolution to work with. So you're creating, particularly when you're talking about like curves and diagonals, it's actually like, it can be fairly complex to do. And so, the Swiftwick K at the very end, we ended up spending, like, that was the one that, like, we spent the most time on because, like, believe it or not, like, it's just kind of challenging to do so in a way. And, like, sometimes you have to kind of, we're literally, like, on, like, a screen, in a conference room, like, deleting a pixel here and, like, putting another pixel here and, like, deleting one there and then putting one there. And ultimately, figured it out.
I'm looking at the K as we speak, and it makes sense.
Do you have the new logo though on your sock?
I don't know. Do I? I don't think I do. Wait, hold on. I'm putting my foot up in the camera.
Yeah. Hard to say. Like, hard to tell on that angle. Also, because it's one of those things that, where
these are brand new.
Once you put a sock on, if they're brand new, I think very likely that these are that these are new. But it's kind of funny because, seeing the sock flat in packaging is one thing. Once it's actually on your foot, it also just kind of, like, skews and morphs and whatever too. And so, yeah, it's one of those things, like, the change was kind of very subtle to begin with, and the amount of difference in how it looks based on kind of what your particular foot and ankle look like is probably, like, a greater range of difference than, like, the change that we made. So, yeah. Nonetheless, we were very focused on ensuring that, like, hey, like, we're going to get these pixels correct.
This man is so passionate about socks. I love it. He's so passionate about socks. I said, don't elaborate. And the second I asked the sock question, it was like 5 minutes about socks. I love it. The man knows his socks. All right, onward. What is the beverage you cannot live without other than water?
So I am one of those weird people that drinks milk even as I'm pushing 40, like, all the time. I've only just, here I go elaborating again. I've been one of those people that up until, like, I started kind of watching out for cholesterol, was drinking whole milk like my 3-year-old.
That's awesome.
Up until, like, 6 months ago.
I go through a quart of whole milk every single day.
That's what I want my CEO to be doing. I want him drinking whole milk on the reg, like with a steak, maybe. I don't know.
Honestly, if my CEO isn't drinking whole milk, I don't trust him. All right. If you could switch jobs with anyone in your company for one day, what position would it be?
Ooh. Might be our field marketing rep, just to get out there and just be with the people. So,
sounds fun. What is your favorite movie?
The Italian Job.
Oh, that's such a good movie. It's actually a great movie. No,
that's Gone in 60 Seconds. This is
man knows his movies.
Another so terrible it's good movie, I think.
Do you like Jake Gyllenhaal movies?
Less a fan of Jake Gyllenhaal movies, I will say. I don't know. There's one, I feel like the one that kind of just creeped me out about him was one where he's kind of this, like, serial killer, like, photographer guy. Is that right?
Yeah, Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler.
Yeah. Like, I watched, like, I don't know, the first, like, 30 minutes of it, and I'm just like, okay, I feel like this, like, changed my view of you forever, sort of thing. So I don't know, maybe unfair, but
interesting. That's literally the movie I was about to say. Do you like this movie? Because I like this movie.
Yeah.
Didn't ask that question though. What is the most memorable moment in your life in the past 10 years? First thing that comes to mind.
Getting married almost exactly 10 years ago.
When's
we just celebrated our September 6th.
Congratulations.
So pretty close, yeah. 2 months ago, I guess, now at this point. But
actually, technically, that's not a correct answer because that is more than 10 years, but we'll let it slide.
Yeah.
Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button for your life?
I think rewind.
What is your all-time favorite TV show? This also tells a lot about a person.
A lot of pressure, Scotty.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna go with Game of Thrones. I think just the depth of the world, and I think, just such a, kind of, amazing character development and themes and whatever. I will say I am judging, or I don't know all the differences between kind of the original sort of books that they were based on and like the show, in a way where I feel like, with like Lord of the Rings or whatever, I kind of read and watched. So, maybe I'm making, the book purist mad or something like that, but that's my answer.
I respect that. What do you eat for breakfast?
As of earlier this year, after reading Comfort Crisis, it's nothing.
Intermittent fasting?
Basically, yeah. So from kind of 8 p.m.
Plot twist
until noon. Yeah. I will say, I think as I have, once I kind of started training kind of a bit more formally earlier this summer, I feel like I've, compromised a little bit on that, because like at some points, like, you can't go for your long run without like feeling somewhat right. But it's also one of those things, like, don't feel too bad about that because I know I'm burning calories right. But less less rigid about it than I was kind of the first 6 months of the year. But it was kind of a New Year's resolution-y kind of thing after reading the book in January. So,
would you rather be 10 minutes late or 20 minutes early?
20 minutes early.
All right. I'm about to ask you like 5 questions that are true rapid fire questions. I need quick answers, Mark. You ready?
All right.
Sweet or salty?
Salty.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Do you enjoy pineapple on pizza?
No, sir.
Thank God. Laces or no laces?
I like both. Currently no lace.
Ooh.
Easy on. But if I'm like running a race or something like that, like, I don't know, the idea of like a no lace thing just does not. Maybe it's a psychological thing. Yeah, it doesn't feel right though. Feels insecure.
This is important as well. A lot of important questions tonight. Is socks with sandals allowed? Is that okay with you?
If you're Gen Z. If you're Gen Z, or if you're a boomer, I guess. Boomer or Gen Z.
I don't even know where I fall, to be completely honest. I don't think I fall into a category because none of my friends do what I do fashion-wise, which means I probably am doing it wrong. But
Birkenstocks, that's the thing.
Dude, I thoroughly enjoy socks with Birks. Thoroughly enjoy. Big fan.
Respect.
Winter or summer. Concert or sporting event? Like a football game.
Sporting event. And winter. Well, winter in Nashville. Winter in New York, maybe we're talking summer instead. So I'll vary my answer based on locale.
Book or movie? I'm gonna go with movie. Gotta be movie. Yeah. Normally I ask people, why do you run? But I want to know this. Why should I buy Swiftwick socks versus another brand?
Here's the pitch. I also want to hear why you run, so we'll save that for after.
Yeah.
I do too.
So
we're about to talk about why you run.
So I think, I'll start with kind of the two parts of, kind of what we already discussed a little bit, right? So I'll kind of do left brain and right brain. We'll start with kind of that left brain functional piece, right? We have the sweat wicking, the breathability, the compression. We have our special technologies and this and that, whatever, right? And I think that is all, call it table stakes, right? On top of that, in terms of kind of features, we have proprietary tech, proprietary fibers that allow you to grip and have stability in a way that no other sock on the market has. But I would say that is just half the story, right? Another part of the story that you're buying, kind of another part of why Swiftwick is the fact that we are made in the USA. We are sustainable in a lot of kind of our manufacturing practices and how we source. And we are creating a world, right, kind of celebrating the idea of being engineered to endure. And so if that's something that you find compelling in a brand world that you want to enter into, like, we want to invite you into that world.
Yeah. I would also say customers, I would add on to that at least your customer service. I've dealt with Swiftwick customer service once or twice, and it's been like super seamless, quick, easy. And I enjoy that in a brand. I think that, like, if there's a brand that I'm a big brand guy, as a lot of us are now, but I think customer service is a huge part of that because it can be frustrating sometimes. Like, you can't like email Nike, like you can, but it's not gonna work, right?
Yeah.
But I can email, like,
and shout out to our lifetime performance guarantee. So
yeah,
that's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, point proven.
Yeah. Up yours, darn tough.
There you go, Dan. Dan, hit him with some running questions, bro.
Well, the main question is, why do you run? Like, what has brought you into the sport, and why do you keep at it with such a busy life? Kids, family.
I think for me, CEO. Part one, I would say, is kind of on the personal front. And I think just sort of building kind of personal discipline and consistency kind of through running as an activity, I think has been really gratifying. I think there's the obvious kind of health benefits as well, which I think are also really great. Like, you kind of, at a certain point in time, you feel like you're getting older, and I would say for sure, kind of having kids and being busy with kids was, definitely kind of started, a season that was kind of probably like the most sedentary of my life, before kind of getting back into, like, originally it was actually, I was swimming a ton right after we actually moved to Nashville. It's always something I've loved, and, lifeguarded as a kid and whatever. But I think running has been, I think, really great as far as kind of, this sort of discipline and health and like those aspects of life. But I think what's also been super gratifying as well, and this is like a completely net new to me thing in terms of kind of the getting back into it, is the community piece. And having kind of that camaraderie, and this past just like a month ago, I ran the Nashville Half, and it was kind of my first time being part of a formal training group. And thinking back to kind of like this other race that I did back in April, like, vibe was completely different. Not only do you have kind of these folks who are kind of like waiting on this bridge, like cheering for you, and in my and a friend's case, like literally like having like a confetti cannon like go off in our face, you know. You know, there's also kind of the folks that you've been training with that you're seeing as you kind of like pass them as you do like out and backs, and like everyone kind of like pumping each other up. And that feeling of kind of being like in it together, and this kind of just supportiveness is something that feels, you know, pretty unique. Like I feel like, I don't know, in like college, you know, it can be, you know, you like spend so much time with people, and, you know, it's sort of like a different stage of life where you kind of make friends and whatever in a different way. And like once you get married and then have kids in particular, like a lot of that kind of changes. And there is an element of like, oh wow, yeah, this is what it was like when, you know, I was briefly during freshman year a rower at Penn, and kind of the feeling of like being on the water at 5 a.m. on the Schuylkill, kind of seeing like the sunrise, like as like 8 people are kind of working in unison to kind of move this boat along is kind of the type of feeling that I really love, but like hadn't had in quite a while. So, you know.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I want to talk to you about Philadelphia, but I know we're short on time here. We have like a number of friends and guests who live in Philly and run down the Schuylkill River Trail and stuff, and it's a great. The Philly Marathon, by the way, is like one of my favorite marathons of all time. But what it like? Are you So you mentioned the book, The Comfort Crisis. Can you just kind of give me like a high level summary of like what you learned from it, or what it's about, and would you recommend it? Because we got a book recommendation from another guest of ours, Dom Schleter of The Running Effect, and I was like skeptical about it. It sounded like self-helpy, but I started listening to it on Audible, and I'm like, I love this book. Like, I want all my friends to read this book. But so, Comfort Crisis. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying like I am like 100% like not like self-help like target audience. Like I find kind of that genre like very annoying, if you will. And I think there's like, you know, notable people that are like discussed in there that, you know, maybe I would kind of find like maybe like a little bit annoying as well. Like there's a certain point in time at which point like someone becomes like sort of too much of like a talking head or thought leader, and, you know, even if they have something good to say, like there's something about it that just kind of somehow like irks me a little bit. Maybe I don't know what that says about me, but all that said, I do think that, you know, maybe I was already predisposed to appreciate what the book had to talk about, because I think there are aspects that are touched on in the book that actually tie into like how I think about parenting and raising kids, and kind of what are the values that you want to instill in your kids. And you know, there's been like a lot of, you know, conversation recently about kind of like the idea of grit, right? And the fact that, you know, a lot of, you know, like kids these days like do not have kind of the resilience that you know, maybe like prior generations had. And like there's a lot of sort of sociological reasons that kind of go into like why and what have you. But even before kind of reading this book, one of the things I remember talking to my wife about was kind of how I think formative scouting was for me growing up, and kind of the idea that you're kind of carrying this, you know, heavy pack, you know, trekking along, and you know, enjoying nature, of course, but like there's a lot of it that's also just kind of physically uncomfortable, right? And I think another just sort of, you know, almost kind of core memory sort of thing was you know, waking up one morning and it's, you know, 19 degrees or something like that, and everyone who was wearing contact lenses, like their contact solution had like frozen, right?
No.
And so like it was literally that cold out. And then we actually have to also kind of break camp and kind of continue backpacking because, we're not car camping here. And it snowed overnight, and, you're kind of like packing your kind of tent in, like that's actually like fine. But then now you have your tent fly that covers a tent, which is covered in snow, and your thick gloves are too thick for you to have the dexterity to be able to actually stuff it into the stuff sack. So you have to take the glove off, grab the snow and the fly together to stuff it in. And there's something I think so like seared in my brain of like how like uncomfortable that was. But it's like, what do they call it? Like type 2 fun or whatever. Like it feels like terrible like when you're doing it, but afterwards you can kind of appreciate. And I feel like for me that was
the marathon.
Yeah, or doing insane endurance events. And I think for me, because of that kind of inclination, I was already, I think, very sort of like open to sort of kind of hearing what he had to say. And at a high level, I think it's basically about how kind of our modern day existence is very easy and kind of too easy relative to kind of what the way that we kind of up until very recently kind of been like evolved to live life, right? And so just kind of taking one example on the kind of food side of the equation, right? Where the body is kind of primed and kind of to laser in on like calorically dense foods, right? Because doing so helps to enable you to kind of get enough calories, and then you have a tendency to, or a kind of natural like bent to gorge because, from a kind of evolutionary biology perspective, you are expecting times of famine to come right around the corner, right? And so you got to load up while you can. But if we live in a day and age where you can have all the calorically dense food all the time, then is it any wonder that we kind of end up having like the bodies that we end up having, right? And I think there was something also that kind of struck me. I think it was in the same chapter or kind of, right before or after, where he's talking about kind of, like the hunger chemical essentially, and how, when you see kind of calorically dense food, like just that action can like secrete this chemical, even though you're not actually necessarily like hungry or in need of those calories, right? And so like think of, like watching TV like late at night, and I don't know, like a freaking Popeyes commercial comes on and you're just like mouth watering and like you start getting so hungry, even though like you just had like a massive dinner, right? And so I think for me, like a part of, and once again, like this term like intermittent fasting as well, I'm like, kind of, but that is essentially kind of what I'm doing. But I'm more like, no, like I'm just, trying to be like conscious about like when, and how much I eat. And, as a, self-professed night owl, as we discussed, I love staying up late, and, I really enjoy eating late at night too. But, I think we all know that doing that and going to sleep right afterwards is like not really great for the body for a variety of reasons. And so, there's a lot more, I think, that he kind of goes into, and then he talks about like rucking, for example, right? And I think he's a big sort of proponent of rucking, and kind of talks about why. And other things that kind of have to do with, kind of essentially embracing discomfort because it's good for you, right? I think that can probably be the sort of nutshell synopsis of the book. So
love it. I'm between books right now, so I might pick that one up. So
I think it's worth reading.
Mark, let's wrap with this, the old billboard question. If you had a billboard in Times Square that was not a Swiftwick advertisement, it's just Mark's message to the world. It could be a quote, just a thought, an image, anything that you want. What's your message?
This message presumes that I'm more introspective and reflective than I am. So, but
could just be a life lesson learned at some point,
And Katie can't help you.
Oh, dang it!
You cannot email Katie.
What would I say? This is a good question. I think for me, it has something, I don't know exactly what the literal words on the billboard might be, but it would be something along the lines of, I think, encouraging one to, pursue whatever it is that I think is important in your life and to pursue it with abandon, to give it your 110%. And I think the phrase I think that comes to mind for me, actually, let me make sure I'm getting this right. So have you ever watched Jiro Dreams of Sushi?
Oh, I've heard it's so good. It's on my list. But
so kind of there's this sort of like,
describe what it's about. It's about a chef, right? A Japanese chef who is more
and it's basically
obsessed with quality, right?
Yeah, and basically, sure, there's him in sushi, but then there's kind of also this Japanese sort of term, like this idea of the shokunin, and there is such dedication to a craft, to an endeavor that is like unparalleled, right? I think in kind of many other cultures, and just kind of using Jiro as like one example, like working at his restaurant, like there's certain things that like you have to like work 10 years to even be able to kind of given a chance to even start trying, much less master, right? And like this idea of kind of like paying your dues and what have you, and just kind of, relentless dedication to craft. I feel like I find so inspiring. Like if there's something I feel like I, would want to kind of encourage people to do, it's to find like whatever it is that like you're made to do, and to, kind of pursue that with
your purpose,
all your heart, mind, soul, strength. So,
Love that. Maybe like pursue your passion, something like that.
Yeah. Yes and no. Like, I think there is something, and I feel like this is why, like, I mean, I do care a lot about like words and, copy, if you will. Right. And I think there is something about, like the word passion that's not quite right. Right. It's, there's something about, WeWork's kind of old tagline, like do what you love, that also isn't quite right to me. I think there is beauty and power in like pursuing the things that you don't love as well, right? There is beauty in kind of the mundane day-to-day of like cleaning up like your infant's poop, right? And those sorts of things too, right? Like, I don't know, like I'm going kind of veering too philosophical, and maybe it's getting late for all of us, but Yeah, it's not quite just like passion or like what you love. And I did kind of frame it like, yeah, like what you were meant to do, right? I feel like I am kind of putting, talking about that as like a little distinct, I guess, from simply what you're passionate about or doing what you love. So there you go. That's me being introspective.
Mark Chou, everyone.
Mark
Thanks so much for having me.
Episode 85.
Episode
Thank
85 of the Life in Stride podcast.
Buy Swiftwick socks. I'm going to link Swiftwick linked in the show notes. Make sure you buy some socks.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I'm looking at the Aspire Mid Crew right now. They have 3 packs, but they're all the same color. I want some variety, so I'll
so this will be my opportunity to mention that we have a build your own bundle. 3-pack, 5-pack. You can choose literally because I mean usually you buy socks
custom bundle.
Buy the 3-pack or the 6-pack or whatever, and they're all like 3 or 6 identical socks, right? So you can change the product line, the cuff height, the color, the size, whatever you want. You can literally build whatever 3 or 5-pack you want. And
it's like boyz pizza,
I think it's
but for socks. It's like build your own pizza.
Then you get a discount thrown in too. Yeah, when you kind of buy in bulk, if you will. So I think I want to say it's 15% off 3 and 20% off 5 or something like that.
And it's almost Black Friday.
I don't know.
I'm sure you'll be busy.
We've got the Tennessee flag.
Yeah, I think it'll hopefully be the busiest time of the year for us. I think it pretty much always is, and I think this year in particular, I think with all the work that we've been doing, we're kind of readying ourselves for a lot of socks to be picked and packed. So, excited for it. And thanks again for having me.
Oh yeah, thanks for making time. I know you're busy. All right,
Episode
85.
All right, guys.
We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Love you, mean it.
All right.